Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Today on So and So, we're stepping into a powerful intersection of storytelling and sewing with filmmaker and artist Valerie Soe. Valerie was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area and is a fourth-generation Chinese American. She's currently a professor in the Asian American Studies Department at San Francisco State University, where she teaches and mentors students while continuing her own expansive creative practice. Her projects have earned numerous awards and grants and consistently explore themes of identity, memory, and community. Her feature documentary, Love Boat Taiwan, in 2019, won the Audience Award at the Urban Nomad Film Festival in Taipei and screened internationally to sold-out audiences. Her experimental documentary, Radical Care, the Auntie Sewing Squad, was made in 2020 and was created in collaboration with the Kronos Quartet and the Auntie Sewing Squad, receiving multiple honors, including the Director's Choice at the Thomas Edison Film Festival and Best of Bernal at the Bernal Heights Outdoor Cinema. Now, Valerie is premiering her newest feature documentary, The Auntie Sewing Squad Resistance Playbook, debuting this month, May 2026, and heading into film festivals nationwide. The film expands on the story of the Auntie Sewing Squad, a grassroots collective of volunteers who came together during the pandemic to sew masks and provide critical supplies to communities in need. Many of you may remember that we previously spoke with the leader of the Auntie Sewing Squad, Kristina Wong, in our episode 75, where we first learned about this remarkable movement. Today, we revisit that story from a new perspective, through Valerie's lens as both participant and filmmaker. Valerie makes her home with her husband in the Bernal Heights section of San Francisco, where they live with their dog Coda. They have two grown daughters. One is a public school teacher in Boston, and the other a photographer in Chicago. In her spare time, Valerie loves to travel to Asia to attend film festivals and is also trying to learn both Mandarin and Japanese. Valerie Soe, welcome to So and So.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Valerie, I'm thrilled that we connected to do this introduction of you, what you create, and also to talk about this film that really gives us a good retrospective of what we all experienced when we went through COVID, and then looking at these remarkable people and the work they did for so many communities. I'd like to go back to the beginning of your sewing journey. Tell us about your 1970s Kenmore and how has sewing stayed with you over the years?
The reason why I still use that machine is that back in the 70s, the Kenmore machines were built like tanks.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were made in Japan and they were all metal. I feel like that must be cast iron because they're very heavy, even though they have plastic casing on the outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they last forever. And all I have to do is try to remember to get it oiled and serviced and cleaned every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it works really wonderfully. But I started out when I was in high school just sewing, I think I sewed clothes for myself, little things, not a lot. I didn't sew that much for a while after I got out of college, but I still had my machine somewhere tucked away. I think when I finally had kids, my older daughter decided she wanted to wear dresses every day.
Okay.
And so that's when I pulled out the machine and started making her little sundresses to wear every day. So it didn't go on that long, but so that was really handy to have some of those skills.
Do you remember the first thing you ever made?
Oh my gosh, that was a long time ago, so I
Mm-hmm.
probably do not.
Okay.
I did a lot of sewing, of course, during the time I was sewing with the Auntie Sewing Squad, but I pull it out now and again to make napkins and things. But I'm not really as ambitious as far as making clothes like I used to make garments and things.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I can't say that I was really great at it, but they were wearable.
Now you have had a remarkable and award-winning career as a filmmaker and artist. What first drew you to storytelling through film?
I grew up in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and my family is Chinese American, and it was really hard back then to find any stories about Chinese Americans in television or film at that time. So I just thought, well, I think we should maybe try to make some movies about my experiences to fill that gap.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons why I started to make movies, is just to try to make movies about the kind of Chinese Americans and Asian Americans that I knew in my life.
Hmm.
So not just people who did kung fu.
So, how did you first become involved with the Auntie Sewing Squad?
Kristina Wong had appeared in my previous film, Love Boat Taiwan, which you mentioned. All of us were locked in our houses during the beginning of the pandemic, and Christina was on Facebook, and she said, I'm going to go on Facebook and do a Facebook Live and show you how to make a face mask. And I thought, oh, well, I think I can remember how to do that. So I looked it up too, and I looked up how to make a face mask. And they're very, I
Hmm.
mean, compared to making garments, so simple, right?
Hmm.
Like 3 or 4 pieces of fabric, not many seams. You turn them inside out, you put it on the elastic, they're done. And so then Christina accelerated her request for people to help make masks because she herself was getting so many people asking for face masks. In March 2020, there wasn't much PPE to be had. You maybe remember that there were pictures of medical workers wearing hefty bags because they didn't
Hmm.
have anything to wear, like
Hmm.
gowns or anything. And I think they said, "Oh, you can make a face mask out of a paper towel," which I thought that can't be very useful or sturdy. So realizing that so many people needed them was the reason why we all decided to start, working together as a group,
Hmm.
because we had a lot of masks that needed to be made.
Actually, this is your second film about the Anti Sewing Squad. At what point did you realize all of this needed to be documented as a film? How did this come to be?
For the first one, again, it was made while we were still in lockdown. I made that in June of 2020, and Kronos Quartet, the string quartet, wanted to make a movie using their music about the pandemic.
Hmm.
And so they got in touch with me through the author Rebecca Solnit, who is a friend of mine, and she recommended me to them, and we just somehow connected. So they sent me a piece of music they had recorded, and then I edited together clips. But the way I got the clips, of course, since we were in lockdown, is I had to ask the aunties on Facebook, on our Facebook group, to use their iPhones or whatever they had and record themselves sewing, because I couldn't go to their houses because we were all on lockdown.
Hmm.
So they would record on the phones, and then they would send them to me through Google Drive, and then I edited them all together. So I thought that that was kind of a nice way to represent as a film what we were doing with masks, except making a movie, right? We all gathered together and collectively made this film. So that was kind of fun to be able to do that. And it was another thing to do while we were just kind of stuck in our houses.
So, how did you decide that there was a need for this second film?
I feel like maybe it's just because the story was so much bigger than the first film. And it seemed like also that time in history was so, there were so many things happening. I mean, you saw the film. When I watched that film again, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we're only up to July and all these things are still happening, So that 2020 was quite a year. And so to have some kind of record of that history from, a regular person's perspective or regular people's perspectives, I think that's why I thought it was a really good story.
You were talking about Kristina Wong, and I had the privilege of interviewing her for an earlier episode of this podcast. What a remarkable woman. She saw a need, did not know anything about what she was about to do, but she made it happen. You know Christina personally. Talk to us about her.
Well, Christina, as they say, is the straw that stirs the drink.
Very appropriate.
She is just really good at galvanizing people. She gets an idea and she decides, she's going to take action on it, whether it's running for office or, getting people to come to her shows or getting this sewing group together. So once she got the idea in her head, she just went with it. And having someone who is that energetic and dedicated is it's inspiring.
Hmm.
It was very fun to be part of the Auntie Sewing Squad, and I think that's part of what was really the draw for a lot of people, is just you could go on Facebook and be relieved from the dreariness of being stuck in your house and being worried about COVID, and you could kind of have conversations with people. And Christina would always say something really hilarious in these conversations, or she would do Facebook lives and like, we'd be entertained by that. So, I mean, we were kind of lucky. We got like this like front row seat to Kristina Wong for several months.
I want to remind people she called herself the sweatshop overlord,
Yes.
which was hilarious.
And again, that was the name of her play, which she won a lot of awards for. And like very tongue in cheek, right? And ironic, but also recognizing that a lot of Asian women did, when they came to the US, worked in garment factories and
Mhm.
what were called sweatshops, So she kind of was reclaiming that term and pointing out the history of a lot of Asian women in the US working in garment factories. And then how it kind of tied into what we were doing, because a lot of the women in the Auntie Sewing Squad were Asian American.
And she even had her mother, Gwen, in the movie.
She did, and she had her own little nickname. Do you remember what it was?
I don't.
Overlord Mommy.
Perfect. And both of them were so affable. When people see this film, that they'll understand what we're talking about. But the work you did with them, you really get to know both of them. Now, I do want to ask you, you were not just an observer and a producer of this movie, but you were a participant in the Anti-Sewing Squad, as you mentioned, and we see in the film. How did that dual role shape the way you approached the documentary?
My earlier films, a lot of them were very autobiographical because I was
Mhm,
a young person and that's what you do is you talk about yourself. And so I think I just have carried that on. Also, I really wanted to kind of emphasize my point of view as someone growing up in the US, whose family came from China long ago, and some of the unique experiences we have. So I think that it's just making sure people know that, this is my perspective. I'm not trying to be an objective observer, which I think, in journalism that's very important, but this is not a journalistic piece. It's a documentary, which is different. And so that also people that they could see that a lot of different folks were involved with the Auntie Sewing Squad. It wasn't just really skilled seamstresses. It could be people who only had their 1970s Kenmore, in their house. And of course, there was a whole subset of aunties who didn't even sew. They would just bake us cookies or banana bread or make us soup. So there's a way for a lot of people to be involved who didn't even know how to sew. There were some people who only cut fabric,
mhm,
some people who only were involved with logistics. So that's one of the reasons why the group was so huge, because it was very inclusive. You could do a lot of,
mhm.
you could have a lot of people enter into this group in a lot of different ways.
Let's talk about the culture and what was going on during the
Mhm,
time all this was made. It was a time when Chinese Americans were in physical danger due to the perception that the pandemic had its origins in Asia.
mhm.
And yet, it's this very group of, I think it was more than 800 members that reached out. They sewed more than 350,000 masks.
Yes.
As a Chinese American yourself, how did this irony affect you?
That was really a time when a lot of anti-Asian violence ramped up.
Mhm,
So for me, it was certainly ironic because we were trying very hard to help out whoever we could. And yet at the same time being scapegoated for what was happening. I think it was a way also for us to feel like we were doing something positive, Asian Americans or Chinese Americans, and that we could try to counteract this misperception, this stereotype that
mhm.
the COVID had come from Asia and it was all our fault. So that was really empowering to be able to say, no, 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 we're really, we're trying to help here.
It was powerful at the end of the film. I don't hope I'm not giving too much away here, but a reunion
Mhm,
and people getting together, that was powerful. The graphics at the beginning of the movie that show the magnitude and speed with which the pandemic
mhm.
spread, and it was haunting to me. Would you talk about some of the most powerful or unexpected moments you captured while you were filming?
I think that because the pandemic went by, it hit so hard so quickly that we still haven't really processed that. It was a very momentous thing that has changed the world. And so now I feel like just being able to slow down and look back about 6 years
Mhm,
later and to, really think about what the impact was. That was very helpful for a lot of people who were in the movie. I think there's one woman who talks about her brother, right? And she used the Auntie Sewing Squad as a way to really process a lot of the feelings that she had from
mhm.
this terrible time that we lived in. So that to me, I feel like that was nice for me to be able to help people to think back and make sure that it wasn't only a traumatic time, but that they could also see it was a hopeful time.
Hmm.
It was a very bittersweet moment, but it's the bitter and the sweet that makes life worth living.
Hmm.
And I thought that was really profound because, sometimes you have to have horrible things happen and then you hopefully will appreciate when the good things happen.
Hmm. Let's talk about the Navajo Nation.
Mm,
Very underserved population as far as PPE was concerned. And yet the Auntie Sewing Squad reached out and helped as much as they could.
mhm.
Would you talk about this a little bit?
Well, the Navajo Nation was amazing because they were hit very, very hard in the beginning. I think they had the highest rate of COVID per capita for the first few months. And then they were able to turn that around by then getting to be the population that had the highest vaccination rate in the country. So
Hmm.
they took it into their own hands to make sure that this was stopped. And one of the things they did was then they paired up with the Auntie Sewing Squad and worked together with them. So, because the Navajo Nation is fairly remote, it's out in Arizona. You have to drive a long way from any city center. But one of our members did have, as they said, a cargo van, and they knew their way around. So they volunteered to drive out a whole bunch of supplies, fabric, sewing machines, thread, also as well as things like disposable diapers for babies and
Hmm.
soap, and stuff like that. And so that was really nice to be able to work with them and help them out and really, let them know that we're there to support them in whatever they needed. And they proved to be really, really great in coordinating and working together with us.
The Anti-Sewing Squad the whole thing was rooted in community care during a crisis, and sewing became both a practical tool and a symbolic art. Would
Mhm.
you talk about that?
When you sew, you have to pay attention to the tiny details. But at the same time, it's not so consuming that you can't do anything else. So I think you said a lot of your audience listens to your podcast while they're
Mhm.
sewing.
Mhm.
So it was a way to give you something to do with your hands, right? Also, you're making something that is helping other people, which always is great when you're able to help out other people. It sort of takes you out of your own problems as well. And then I think just to be able to work together with such a large group of people symbolically was really wonderful because, again, we did feel very isolated in our houses during the
Mm.
beginning of the pandemic because we couldn't go outside. So even though it was only online that we connected with each other, I think that there was still that connection. So that was really nice. And I think also for a lot of people, because they had learned sewing from their moms or their grandmothers, or they might have even been using their sewing machines from their parents or their grandparents, right? Their grandmas. That was kind of a nice way to tie that in for a lot of folks. Yeah.
What do you hope people take away from this film, whether they sew or not?
I think hopefully you'll see that when faced with a crisis, if you can take action, that is always a really great solution. If you sit and just feel like you can't do anything, then that makes it worse. But
Mhm.
if you're able to somehow get out there and do something, however small it might be, then it will make you feel better and you'll be contributing to the solution moving forward. If you can join together with a lot of other like minded people, that's even better because, there's power in numbers, right?
Mhm.
So to be able to work with a lot of people who are working towards the same goal is really wonderful. And when you're faced with something like a global pandemic and it feels overwhelming, you realize that you can work together with this large number of people who want to help other people and do the same thing as you are. That to me, I think is very transformative because you learn from that experience. You will be able to remember, I did that back when things seemed very dark. I
Mhm.
was able to move forward and work with other people and help other people working towards a solution. And, like you said, it was a very grassroots movement. It was inspired by a lot of people just deciding to work together. You can make change with other people. And you're not just living by yourself in a little house or a silo or whatever you want to call it. You can really find other like-minded people and make change.
This is such a strong example of one of the communities that sewing creates and how it brings people together that people might overlook. There's a lot of people who quilt together, sew together,
Mhm.
and yet this was something that a specific instance brought together.
And I think I'm glad you brought up quilting because quilting is such a great example, both symbolically as well as practically, right? You're bringing all these little tiny pieces together that might not have any relationship in the beginning, but then they become a bigger piece that
Hmm.
is beautiful. Yeah, and I think that that's the thing about quilting is that it's so magical to me,
Hmm.
always. So I don't personally quilt, but I really love people who quilt, and I wish maybe that will be my next step is learning how to quilt.
Both as a sewist and an artist.
Mhm.
What's next for you and what's your dream?
Well, making an independent film is a long and time-consuming and expensive process.
Hmm.
So right now, just for the short term, I think I'm going to really enjoy sharing this movie with a lot of people and resting a little bit from the hard process of filmmaking. So I think that that's something that I'm really going to hopefully be able to do in the next several months is to see what the audience reaction is, meet other people who might, either be involved or indirectly or directly with the Auntie Sewing Squad or introduce new people to the Auntie Sewing Squad. Because I think it was a really amazing group. And I think that it's a good story for people to hear. And hopefully it will make people feel like they can go forward and do a similar thing, somehow change the world.
You mentioned making an independent film. I don't know if our listeners understand
Yes.
what's involved. Can you walk us through what that process is?
Well, of course, most of the movies we see in movie theaters or on, television, they're supported by very large entities like studios or streaming systems and so forth. And partially that's because filmmaking costs a lot of money. You have to
Hmm.
hire a lot of people who are very highly skilled. So when you make an independent film, which may or may not be made as a commercial product, right? You don't necessarily think you're going to make any money off it. I certainly never make any money off of my films. Um, Whereas things that show in the movie theaters or on television, they're generally thought of as being something you want to make money off of.
Hmm.
So to make an independent film, you have to find a way to pay for it. And luckily, I teach at San Francisco State, so I was able to get some funds from them. Some public funds from government grants. But I have to say, a lot of the funding came from crowdfunding. I
Hmm.
just did a big crowdfunding campaign. And so you do have to piece it together and think of a lot of little tiny things. Whereas if you're making a bigger film through a studio, then you don't have to worry about paying for it. You just take the check and you make the movie.
Hmm.
That means that then you give up creative control. Whereas if you make the film independently, then you supposedly have more creative control and your vision is a little clearer. So to me, that's the difference between a more independent film and a more commercial film is that you have more creative control, but you have to raise the money yourself. So there's a trade off.
So, as this podcast is released, the film will have been debuted on May 2nd, and we wish you the very best with that. How can our listeners see this film?
Well, we do have a website where the schedule will be updated. The website is the title of the film.
Hmm.
It is the Auntie Sewing Squad Resistance Playbook.com. And there's links to the Instagram and the Facebook and the Twitter if you want to go on there instead. But the website is definitely the best place.
Perfect. Valerie, in our conversation today, is there any question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
Oh gosh, no, I don't think so.
Well, I highly recommend this film to anybody who would want to understand the anti-sewing squad and really the enormity of what they did during a very difficult time.
Mhm.
And I want to thank you for this wonderful conversation. I have loved hearing your story and the story of the film. If our listeners would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Facebook is my name, Valerie. So VALERIESOE, all in one word.
Hmm.
I think it's the same on Instagram. And those are probably the best ways. I do want to say, I hope that if anybody hears this podcast and then comes to a show, let me know because I'm curious to find out if people know about the film from the podcast.
Perfect. And I would encourage all of you sitting with us today, when you do see the film, do reach out to Valerie and let her know what you thought of it.
I would love that.
Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, another story about someone just like you, someone for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something much bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.